Hi there, welcome back. Luke here with you. In this video series, we're going from start to finish how you can build your own hydrofoil from home. And in this video, we're going to go through shaping your foil wings. So in this video, we'll be marking our holes. We'll also be shaping our profile through the wing and also shaping our foil shape in the wing in preparation to get ready to seal it with some resin, which will be in the next video. But I did just want to mention again, it's a great idea to try and get this process and the next video done in the same day. So, today's a new day. I'm here in the morning and I'm going to shape up the wings, and then by this afternoon I'll have a coat of sealer on it to make sure the wood doesn't move. Because as we start to take more and more thickness out of the wood as we're shaping the foil shape, it is more susceptible to cupping and to moving, to twisting. And so again, it's a really good idea if you can just dedicate more time for this process to make sure you shape it and seal it all in one day. So the very first thing we're going to be doing is marking out our holes. This is just a preliminary hole that I'll show you in a moment we're going to use to actually help hold the wings as we're shaping them. We'll be re-drilling them in the future, but it's good if you can just try and get this nice and accurate at the start anyway. So if we come to the wing measurements, you can see with the profile that we have, I've actually marked it from the front here, so 30 millimeters from the front, but we're actually going to, I'll change this on the plans by the time you can download them, and it's actually 20 millimeters from the back, and if you just do the calculation, and it's actually better to mark it from the trailing edge, and you'll see that in the later stages. So that's for the front wing, and for the rear wing, you can see I have specified from the back, so it's 30 millimeters from the back to the first hole. So if we just start, I'll move this over. We've already marked our center line. This is the reference point that we marked at the start. So from the trailing edge, we're just literally going to follow the plan and go from the very back of the trailing edge there and just mark with the dot at 20. That will be the back hole, and then every 25 millimeters after that. And we've got 5 holes in total, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then for the rear wing, you can see we're actually going 30 millimeters from the trailing edge and then 30 millimeters for 2 screws. So again, from the back, 30 and 30. And I just to clarify, the reason that we're marking it from the back and to mark it from the trailing edge is if I grab, you can kind of make out where the mast joins here. And you can see this distance in between the trailing edge of the wing and the front of the mast is reasonably important. It's good to have that at around about 1 inch. So this distance here, the overhang from the front of the fuselage to the leading edge of the wing, isn't so critical. So if we mark it from the trailing edge here, we'll know that we always have about 25 to 30 millimeters from the trailing edge, and the wing, if you make a bigger wing, will simply overhang over the front of the fuselage, which isn't going to, or a smaller wing, it will come back a little bit and it's not going to matter. So now that we've marked out the holes, you just want to drill it with around about 3 to 4 millimeter drill bit. And you want to keep it reasonably plumb, but of course we're going to be doing this again later. Okay, so with the holes marked, what I like to do then is actually flip them over, and then this will actually be where we're joining onto the fuselage. It's better to always mark from where the connection point is from the fuselage to the wing, because just in case you're slightly off with your drill, it's not reliable that the other side's going to be accurate. So what I like to do in order to make it easier to shape, is actually just get a block of wood, something like this, and this will be able to be fitted into the vise to help hold the wing while we're shaping it. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but you just want to flip it over and we'll secure it to this block of wood. This is wide enough just to catch 3 screws. Better if you can catch 3 screws, I think, because you do put a bit of force on it while you're... It doesn't need to be perfectly straight or anything like that. I like to pre-drill into it. And as we're shaping it, we'll actually need to continue to drive the screw heads down so we're not hitting it with the spoke shave. I actually split the block out a little bit in the back there, it didn't quite catch, so I'm just going to go with the 2 screws and just keep an eye on it to make sure that it doesn't start wobbling around. And then we'll do the same thing with the small wing. So now that we've got the wings attached ready to just something that makes it easier to handle, the first step is we're going to actually shape the profile shape, so bringing the wingtip thicknesses down on either side. And you can see that it is specified on the plans and some of the dimensions as well. So what we're basically doing is at the side of the wingtips, just bringing it down to 50% of the thickness. So this one's 7 millimeters thick. So on the wingtip, we're going to bring it down to 3.5 millimeters. And for the big one, of course, we've got 14 millimeters in the center, and so we'll bring it down to 7 millimeters on the side. If we look at the big wing, a little easier to see, we've got 120 millimeters flat from the center, and then it starts to taper down to that 50%, which is the 7 millimeters. And also there's a couple of reference points here, so we can just plot a couple of dimensions on the side. So if we go ahead and I'll start that, basically the first thing to do is just mark the center. Sometimes it's easier just to just lightly clamp that in there. So what we're looking for, start from the 100. About there, so we're coming up 7. And I like to just draw a line along the wingtip here at about 7 millimeters, so I can see that as a reference as I start to shape it down. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Seven. Okay, and then we come and we start from this center line. So it's going to be where the holes are, so it's reasonably easy, and it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect because remember you still have to actually shape this. So I'm just going to go from the center of this hole and come across the 120 millimeters as specified on the plan. Same on this side. And really, the purpose of this isn't to come exactly to that point. The purpose is to mainly, as you're starting to shape, realize that you don't actually want to touch this point at the start, and it'll only be at the end. So we'll basically be curving down from there, and we'll sort of sand that line off and make it smooth with sand in. So now, if you are feeling not so confident about making a really nice gradient there, then what you can do is actually, as I said, plot these dimensions. So if we flip it over, it's a little easier to mark on the trailing edge. You can come to 25, 75, and 150. And then from the bottom side, we're at 8.5, 11, and 12.5. So we can come up, find it easier to work from the 100 here. 7, 8.5. E11. And 12.5. And that will give you a bit of a reference point that we're coming from there, and it's sloping up like this to nothing here. So then for this, using such a soft wood, I actually like just to use a spoke shave and just pull it down. I'll show you exactly what I mean, but you can also use an electric planer or something a little faster, or even a hand plane, something like this as well. Some people might prefer to use that. Okay, so this is what I mean by using the block. So if I actually, on this bench, what I've done is it's resting on the trailing edge there. So as I start to pull down on this, it doesn't actually put too much weight. It's kind of supported. As I need to get maybe more room that I can use my hands, I might lift that up. But then really all we're doing is starting to spoke shave it off. So you're just pulling towards yourself. Typically with the end grain like this, you want to sort of work towards yourself, not so much like this, unless the grain itself really gets knotty and you have to sort of turn the spoke shave around so it doesn't chip, and you can just work yourself. So what I like to do is start on the end, closer to the end, because that's where we're taking most off, and then slowly increase the length of the stroke there, and then again a bit longer, and then a bit longer. What that will do is that will actually start building a natural curve. So I'll continue with this. Okay, so now I've got most of the shape taken out. It's a good time to actually come back and check those reference points. So measuring in from each wingtip and just comparing this thickness, so you can see that that's at about 14 millimeters at the moment. But over on this side, we're down at about 13. So just checking those points. You could also do that on front and back if you can't see the thickness from the trailing edge to the leading edge of that same reference point, and just sort of checking your thicknesses there. We're going to obviously take a lot more out for the foil, but this just ensures that your profile from side to side, your wingtips are even. So it's worth just measuring from time to time, making sure that you've got those thicknesses correct. And I did end up using the plane, particularly with these down sort of shapes. It's actually pretty easy to rip some off as well. So I'm using a combination of the spoke shave and plane at the moment. But yeah, so I'm just going to finish, I'll clean this up, and then we're going to move to the small wing. It's exactly the same process, so I'm just going to be marking the half thickness and then just taking that profile down. Okay, so now that we've got the profile shaped, you can see the tapering to the corners, or to the wingtips, it's time to actually start to do our foil shape. And so the foil shape is, there's a pattern, so a template, one of the templates. So what I'll do is I'll cut this template out, and this just, so we've got the rear wing and the front wing, and you'll be able to just hold that over it in the center, so where the center line is, to basically get a close idea, I should say. But really, what's fun about this part, I think, and this is sort of the whole point of building the foil from start to finish, is this shaping part, because this is when you're actually making the foil that flies, and that's what's satisfying at the end, when you've actually shaped something and then it actually works. And so you're basically just using your eye. I guess a tip would be to get this nice and even on either side. There's two ways. You want to sight it a lot, or three ways. You want to sight it with your eye and make sure everything is looking even and looking nice. You want to measure from those reference points like we were talking about before, and also feel. So you can actually, if you sort of don't look at it and you feel with your fingers, often you can actually feel where the highs and lows are, and if it's even as well. So use all three of those to try and make a wing that's symmetrical and also that looks good and smooth, you know, doesn't have bumps in it, doesn't have dips in it. And so our goal now is to basically use this section, so this cross section, to find our center, but then use our eye to basically blend that out to the wingtips on either side, so that we have this nice even foil. Now, it's said that you really want to try and reduce lift in the wingtips, and that's one of the reasons that we slim out through the profile. So basically, this profile that I've designed here, you can modify that if you want. If you wanted to really slim that out into the wingtip, you can. You could leave it a bit thicker, so it doesn't have to be exactly what the measurements specified there. You can sort of use your own eye and how you want to do it. But just as a rough guide, if you start with the thickness in the center and go to the half thickness for this, then that's a good first step. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll quickly cut out these profiles, and then we'll start shaping the foil shape. Okay, so I've cut out the foil templates. You could also plot your own template, of course, and mark it on a piece of card. The paper's a little bit thin. It would be better if this was on cardboard just to hold it above it, but it will work. Now, the next step is to actually mark out our thickest point on the wing. So if I just come back to the full wing, you can see this dotted line here is basically the max thickness line of the foil section. And so what we've got here is 3/10 of the chord length there, and so of course as the foil slims out towards the wingtips, that changes slightly. So we'll measure it 45 in, and then at a 75 point in from the wingtip, we go 27. Again, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but it's a good guide. So if we start with the main wing in the center, we're going to come to 45, and then just come in 75, just the best you can, so just eyeing that up from the wingtip. From this wingtip, again, just eye it up. And then 27 in from the leading edge. 27 and 27. And these are just some reference points. So then what I like to do is, if you've got somebody to help you hold this to bend a stick or a ruler, that's great, but if you don't, then what I like to do is just clamp the thickness of a steel ruler away from that line. Just gently clamp that on. Do the same thing over here. Something like that. And then using a steel ruler or a thin piece of wood or something like that, you can rest it against those two and actually pull it into the center. And keeping the thickness off there, you should be just on the line on the other side. And that's just a bit of a simple way now just to mark a curved line along the foil here. And what all this is going to do is serve as a bit of a guide for, as we're shaping our foil now, our foil shape, we want to sort of move our max thickness line along this line. Now it could, like I said, it could be slightly different to this, but just so you've got a bit of a guide, I find that's helpful when we're shaping it. So now we'll mark it on the small wing. If we refer to the plans, I've noticed that I didn't actually specify it here, but 3/10 of the 80 is 24 millimeters. So we'll come in 24 millimeters to the max thickness line and then actually curve it out in a similar fashion. So we just come again from the leading edge. We'll mark 24, it's just right on that screw there. So what we've got is now we've got our max thickness line, and the next step is to basically start carving this down. I do almost all of it by hand, except for the big wing. I found that I can take a lot of this thickness out with an electric planer. So I'm going to set up the electric planer, and then we'll take a lot of the thickness out of the back, and then we'll hand shape the rest of it. Okay, so you can see a couple of things to pay attention to while you're just electric planing is you don't want to go too thin on this trailing edge and actually go past the thickness here. So really important about that, and you don't want to hit any screws, of course. But what's cool about doing the taper first, so the profile first, is it actually creates a bit of a natural line, natural curve. You can see that the planer, just by planing straight, starts to create that max thickness line for us because it's actually coming off the taper there. So that's a good start. And so now what I'll do is I will start with the spoke shape and the plane again. You could, in theory, hit this 1 or 2 times just to take some of that bulk out, but it's quite small, so you don't necessarily have to. And yeah, let's get shaping. When you've got most of the bulk out of it, with the spoke shave, what you can start to do now is try and take more out of here than out here. So you're basically bringing your spoke shave around on a curve. So you're working some of this bulk out of the middle. So you're working in the curve of that max thickness line. And you'll be doing that for sort of the rear and also the leading edge. So as we start to come around the leading edge, you're basically working it around the corner, of course, because it's already curved. But try and keep that same sort of motion happening with the back. Now, also, as it starts to get thin, you have to pay attention not to put too much pressure, particularly on these wingtips. So just have to be gentle throughout all of that. And sometimes the plane is a bit better for just getting that last bit. But because this is a curved shape, it's good to use the spoke shape here and really longer strokes as well. So bringing it all the way around. So while you're shaping it, you can see I'm taking it down off the leading edge now. And what I like to do is keep a parallel line, so not actually fully round it in the early stages, so you can see your thickness or how much you've taken off on this side and this side. So trying to keep that parallel hard edge on the top there. So basically you're just looking to have a reference, or am I taking the same amount off either side? So just like when we're doing the profile, now with the foil shape, we're still trying to make sure it's even from side to side. And I try and do that kind of with the top as well. So you can see I still haven't touched the pencil line, and we're basically just running like long strokes along either side, and you can sort of make it out. I'm not sure if it will come across on the camera, but just where the stroke of the plane is running right along there, and I like to bring it around the corner. So as you're starting to get to the corner, sort of bring it around all the way, and it'll also almost make it, you can see right on the end there, it almost makes a small peak on the very end that will blend off with the sander. Now, of course, as you're getting closer, you can start to use the template. So we put the template on the top and see how close we're getting. You can see it's a little tiny bit wider, so I just need to cut that down slightly. And this is the struggle with the paper, but hopefully you can see the gap through there. And you can start to make out where you might need to take some more off. So this, again, we want to use this as a guide in the middle so we can get our sort of general foil shape right, and then we'll be blending that out evenly on both sides, using our pencil line here as a reference point for what we've touched, also using this parallel line or this hard edge that we're leaving, and also at the trailing edge you can see the difference in thickness between this edge and this edge, and you're basically just trying to make sure everything is even. So I've got a little bit more to do, so I'll get back to it. Okay, so you can see we're getting pretty close here now. We've got the rear wing, and you can see trying to do the same thing. So you've got this parallel line running all the way along the leading edge, and then really slimmed out the thickness into the trailing edge there. That's really quite thin now, so you've got to be careful with that. But the thinner you can get that, the better. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to go too thin that it'll just snap off, and we still have to sand this. So I try and plane it down to about 1 millimeter. So that's about probably 1.5 millimeters at the moment at the trailing edge. And then the template is starting to look pretty good. So when I put that on there, that's starting to get pretty close there now. It's a bit hard with one hand, but you can start to see that shape is starting to be really close. I've blended it out. Again, you can see, same as the top, the front wing, sorry. Hopefully the lighting's not too bad there. But the line is basically running backwards, so you're just trying to keep an even line from side to side. And again, use your hands to feel either side, make sure that's feeling good, and also siding it. And you can even measure certain points if you want, try and measure certain points. But to me, that is starting to look pretty good. And so the next step is going to be to sand it. So for sanding, I like to use a random orbital. It's got 80 grit paper on it. The 80 grit paper will still shape, especially something as soft as cedar, so it'll still change the shape. So you've got to be careful if you're not used to sanding, making sure that you're constantly moving the sander, not building divots, never tilt the sander onto its edge, and you don't want to create all these irregular shapes. Now you've done such a great job getting it to this point. So a couple of things for sanding is this wood is just absolutely beautiful. So it doesn't have any knots or chips. It's machined up really well. If yours has lots of little chips in it, you'd be better off just still sanding over that nice and flat and leaving those chips, and then just having the fiberglass go over that, than trying to dig out any of those chips to make it look smooth. I think that, you know, overall, you don't really want to change the shape and have these weird shapes just to get rid of wood chips. So, or you sand the whole thing backwards and forwards, making sure you're coming off nice and evenly with the sander if you want to remove any of those sorts of imperfections. So now a couple of things that I'm going to be doing with the whilst sanding. I'm going to be slimming out this wingtip. So you can see, if we go this way, the high point here, I'm going to just sort of bring that down a little bit on the wingtip to make sure that we don't have any aggressive lift right there on the wingtip. So we'll slim out the wingtip a little bit. Also, we'll start to round this leading edge. So we've left this hard edge until now. So we'll actually round that over so it's flat with the front edge, but not sanding the front edge. So just bringing it just to close to, but not actually changing the shape of the leading edge. And then what we'll do is we'll unscrew this block and we'll actually roll over the underside. So the underside gets a curve as well. So I will hit that just slightly with the spoke shave, and then I'll sand that as well. All I'm trying to do, particularly with the 80 grit, is get rid of any of the lumps, any of the highs and lows. I'll work from side to side and also from front to back. And you know, I've used a sander a lot. I don't know if I mentioned, but I was trained as a timber fine furniture maker. So I've done a lot of hours on the sander, but I know it can be a hard point for people that are new to sanding, not to sort of make any mistakes. So just go at your own pace. This is the final shape. This is what, you know, when we lay the fiberglass, it doesn't change the shape at all. So this is the chance to get it to the shape that you want it. And then once I've done with the random orbital, then I'm going to hit it with just a hand sander and a block. Something like this. And that way we'll be going along with the grain, trying to remove some of those little circles that the sander will leave in it. And then, yeah, we'll be ready to seal it. So let's get into it. So just before I go any further, you can see that I've sanded, so I was really trying to just smooth out the surfaces, but I just wanted to again talk about this wingtip. You can see that we've still got the hard edge, so before you roll it, this is sort of the last thing that you do. You don't want to bring it down too sharp, but rolling this radius that will essentially go from the bottom around to the top, if you can imagine, that's going to be sort of like a pencil round or about a 5mm round radius. And so I like to leave this sort of, that's about 5mm there, that I'll round this over and this under. But until that moment that you round it over, you're still using this line as a reference line that comes all the way around the wingtip. And so when I was saying I'm going to slim out that wingtip, that's essentially what I've done now. You can see that I've brought the sander around and brought that whole, it's almost a parallel line now from the leading edge around to the corner, and that will slim that out. And I've sanded off the trailing edge as well, so that's getting quite thin there. I'll probably take a little bit more off the trailing edge. And you can see I've started blending off the top, so some of the pencil line's gone now, just moving backwards and forwards and trying to blend it. Again, just using your hand to feel that. Are there any highs and lows? And yeah, we'll keep sanding. Okay, so now that I'm happy with the majority of the shape, you can see that's really starting to look nice and smooth now. I'm going to roll these edges over, and I'm actually going to do the small one just completely by hand, and the bigger one I'll just take a little bit with the spoke shave. So now one of the things I like to do is just to finish your sanding with along the grain. So you basically want to run your sandpaper along the grain, and just using a block. This is a soft block, so the block itself is sort of flexible and soft, so it makes it easy to do a curved shape like this, and that's 120 grit on top of that. So now I'm going to hand sand it all up. Okay, so now the foil is sanded. I've unscrewed the bolts and I'm just going to lightly sand this flat surface. The way I like to do that is I still use the random orbital, but I just sort of very gentle pressure there and let it spin and just keep a really flat sanding surface. You don't want to, what you're trying to avoid, I should say, is making any weird shapes here where the fuselage is going to attach to this line or to these screw holes. So you just want to be moving the sander across there, nice light pressure, and that should keep it pretty flat, and you don't want to over sand this. This is just going to be a light sand just to make it look nice, but really we don't want to spend too much time on it. Also, we'll roll over the bottom edge here, and so that can be that can either be a small radius, or you can actually swoop it back slightly and take a bit more on that. It's going to be up to you. I'm going to take a little bit more, and I'll show you exactly what I take. But yeah, so this is going to be the last stage, just to sand the bottom, and then we're going to be ready to seal it. Okay, so now I think I'm finished sanding. A couple of things just to pay attention to is right over on the wingtip here, you can see I've rounded this over. So you really want that to be a round, and same from underneath coming up and over. Mainly because as you start to fold in the next steps, we'll fold fiberglass over it, and fiberglass really doesn't like bending over a square edge. So make sure that everything is softened, all the corners are softened, and you can see, like I was talking about, if you actually really were to zoom in on this radius here, it's not actually a radius, it starts a bit steeper and sweeps back, so you can sort of sand a little flatter off the top there, and that actually is the shape that I like to do, but honestly it's going to work regardless. So I'll just show you the small one, and I just want to remind you that if you are looking for the materials or the plans, then you can find all of that at flukeskitesurfing.com. So we're going to have everything on our website that you can get all various pieces that you need, but also all of the details and the steps all outlined, plus the plans, the amounts, the quantities that you need, and things like that. So you can see this wing is done as well, and I think this one's really come up really nicely. I really liked the yellow cedar, very nice to machine. It's a bit slimmer than the previous version, so I think it's going to be a really nice rear wing. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to apply the sealer coat of resin, and as I've already touched on, we really want to get straight to that to make sure that you seal this straight away. So I'll see you in the next video.